The film opens with a note explaining that in Stratford record from the late 16th century, the names Hamnet and Hamlet were used interchangeably. The story follows the life of Agnes, the woman who would later be known to history as Anne Hathaway, though here she is called by the name used in her father's will. Agnes lives on the edge of Stratford, moving easily between her family's house and the surrounding woods. She keeps a hawk and practices falconry, wearing a thick glove as the bird settles onto her wrist. She has knowledge of plants and remedies passed down from her mother, and many in town consider her strange. Some even whisper that she is the daughter of a forest witch. Agnes doesn't concern herself with the gossip. She listens to the wind, studies the landscape, and trusts her instincts. Her life changes when she meets a young Latin tutor, visiting Hugh Lands to teach local boys in order to help repay his father's debts. This young man is William Shakespeare. He first notices her when he sees her returning from the woods. He approaches her awkwardly, curious about the hawk and about her. The bird nips his finger, and Agnes explains that it is a sign of affection. He asks her name. She refuses at first, then tells him. They share a sudden kiss before he leaves. Both struggle within their families. Agnes lives with her stepmother, her children, and her brother. She is close to her brother, but distant from her stepmother. William lives under the authority of a father who belittles him and expects him to continue the family trade of glove-making. His father's criticism often turns physical. William feels trapped between duty and ambition. He seeks Agnes out again, attempting to give her a new falconry glove as a gift. She tells him she already has one, but she doesn't send him away. When he admits that he finds it difficult to speak freely, she asks him to tell her a story instead. He recounts the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice, describing a man who journeys to the underworld to retrieve his dead wife, only to lose her again by turning back too soon. Agnes treats a cut on his forehead with an herbal remedy. She also speaks of a vision she once had, of herself dying with two children at her side. The vision unsettles her, but she doesn't fully understand it. Their relationship deepens in secret. When Agnes becomes pregnant, the secrecy ends. She leaves her family home and goes with her brother to William's house. His mother is furious, and his father is concerned about scandal and debt. After tense negotiations, it is agreed that the two will marry. Agnes gives birth to their first child, a daughter, alone in the forest, and the couple begin their life together. William continues working in his father's glove business, but grows increasingly resentful. He eventually fights back against his father's abuse and leaves. He focuses more seriously on writing, though frustration and alcohol begin to affect him. He feels confined in Stratford. Agnes recognizes that his ambitions will not fit within the town's limits and urges him to seek work in London, where theaters are flourishing. He leaves, promising to send for them once he is established. While Agnes is pregnant again, a violent storm strikes Stratford. As her labor begins, she insists on going into the forest to give birth, just as she had done before. She believes she is meant to deliver her children there, close to the land. She tries to leave the house despite the worsening weather, but the river has burst its banks and flooded the surrounding fields. The path to the forest is impassable. She panics, fearing that being forced to remain inside will cost her child's life. She remembers her own mother's death and the sense that children are quickly forgotten. She does not want her child to be lost or unnamed. With no way out, she is restrained and must give birth inside the house. The labor is long and painful. She delivers a son they name Hamnet. Moments later, it becomes clear that she is carrying a second child. She gives birth to a girl who appears lifeless. The women around her assume the baby is stillborn, but Agnes refuses to let her be taken away. She does not believe children simply pass upward into a distant heaven. She believes they remain near, in the air, in the land, in the spaces between the living and the dead. She holds the child, speaks to her, and wills her to breathe. After tense moments, the baby stirs and begins to cry. The twins, Hamnet and Judith, survive. 11 years pass. The children grow up in a house divided between absence and anticipation. Their father returns periodically from London, bringing stories of actors and stages. The twins are inseparable and often exchange clothes to trick their family. They perform scenes, recite lines, and show an early love of drama. Agnes teaches them about plants and memory. Meanwhile, William's career advances. After one visit, he leaves again. His son, who is deeply attached to him, cries as he departs. Agnes comforts her son and predicts that he will one day thrive in London, perhaps even on the stage. In London, William witnesses the fear surrounding the plague. Back in Stratford, illness reaches their home. Judith falls sick first, burning with fever. Agnes uses every remedy she knows: herbs, heated water, careful tending. The household prepares for the worst. Hamnet stays by his sister's side, and in a moment of desperate love, begs the sickness to take him instead. He promises to be brave. Judith recovers miraculously, but Hamnet begins to show the same symptoms. His condition deteriorates rapidly. Agnes remains beside him, trying every treatment, refusing to surrender him. In his fever, he seems to wander through an empty house, calling for her. Despite her efforts, he dies in her arms, and her cry fills the house. His sisters see his body and struggle to comprehend what has happened. William returns from London too late. He can only stand over his son and repeat that this is his boy. The grief between husband and wife is immediate and raw. Agnes describes Hamnet's suffering in detail. William is overcome by guilt for not being present. Agnes blames herself as well and says that she can no longer see the future as she once did. When William announces that he must return to London for the new theatrical season, Agnes is angry. She cannot understand how the world can continue as though nothing has happened, but he leaves anyway. In London, William begins writing a new tragedy. He pushes his actors to dig deeper into their roles, demanding emotional truth rather than mechanical recitation. He is particularly harsh with the young actor playing the prince. Alone by the river, he quietly murmurs the words, "to be or not to be," testing them aloud as he wrestles with his own despair. Back in Stratford, Agnes learns that his new play is titled The Tragedy of Hamlet. The similarity of the name to their sons is impossible to ignore. She travels to London with her brother to see it performed. The theater is crowded. As the play begins, Agnes watches intently. She reacts audibly at times, unsettled by hearing her son's name spoken on stage. The story unfolds. A prince grieving his dead father, haunted by a ghost, unable to move beyond loss. When William appears as the ghost of Hamlet's father, she realizes that he has placed himself inside the narrative of grief. Gradually, she understands that the play is not a mockery of their son, but a transformation of their loss. The prince's sorrow mirrors the emptiness left by Hamlet's death. During a key scene, as the prince confronts the ghost, Agnes silently beckons her husband in the audience as she once did on their wedding day. He deepens his performance, speaking as though he is addressing his own child. At the end of the play, Hamlet dies. The audience stretches out their hands toward him as he delivers his final lines. In that moment, Agnes envisions Hamlet standing on the stage, looking back at her before disappearing into the shadows backstage. The image does not erase her grief, but it reshapes it. For the first time since her son's death, she allows herself to smile. The film closes with the sense that while a child's life cannot be restored, memory can be carried forward in another form. Through the creation of Hamlet, personal loss becomes enduring art, and Hamlet's name, interchangeable with Hamlet's, remains alive in story, performance, and remembrance. The relationship between Hamlet's death and Hamlet becomes most powerful when viewed through the lens of memory and immortality. This is not a matter of documented intention, but of thematic resonance. The historical record tells us that Shakespeare's son Hamnet died in 1596 at the age of 11. A few years later, Shakespeare wrote Hamlet, one of the most enduring works in world literature. While no evidence proves that one event directly caused the other, the emotional parallel is difficult to ignore. Hamnet, the child, disappears from history almost entirely. Beyond a parish record of his birth and death, little remains. He left no writings, no legacy, no achievements that would preserve his individual story. Like many children in the 16th century, his life was brief and largely undocumented. In practical historical terms, he faded. Yet soon after, the name, nearly identical in Elizabethan spelling, reappears on stage as Hamlet. This is where the idea of memory versus immortality begins to emerge. Hamnet, as a living child, could not be preserved. Death erased his physical presence and his future. But through Hamlet, something bearing his name entered cultural permanence. The play does not retell Hamlet's life, nor does Prince Hamlet resemble the historical boy in any biographical way. However, the transformation of a name associated with private loss into one associated with global literary immortality creates a striking symbolic echo. The play Hamlet is itself deeply concerned with remembrance. The ghost's command to his son, "Remember me," establishes memory as an ethical and emotional obligation. To forget is to allow someone to vanish entirely. To remember is to grant them continued presence in the world of the living. The drama revolves around this tension, as characters struggle not only with death, but with the fear of being erased. In this context, the potential link between Hamnet and Hamlet takes on additional meaning. If Shakespeare was confronting the death of his son, he would have been confronting not only grief, but also the finality of disappearance. A child's death carries a particular brutality. It interrupts future possibility. There are no accomplishments to anchor memory, no public identity to preserve. The child survives only in the minds of those who loved him. Art, however, functions differently. Art extends beyond the lifespan of its creator and its inspiration. Hamlet became a text that would be performed, studied, translated, and remembered for centuries. While Hamlet's life ended in obscurity, Hamlet, the character, achieved a form of immortality. This does not mean that art resurrects the dead or erases the loss. It suggests, instead, a transformation. Personal grief can be converted into narrative, and narrative can outlive mortality. Through this process, something of the emotional truth of loss survives, even if the individual does not. The parallel can therefore be understood symbolically. Hamlet dies, and Hamlet is born. One existence ends, another begins. The private tragedy remains largely unrecorded, yet the artistic creation becomes permanent. In this sense, art does not defeat death, but it resists oblivion. Whether or not Shakespeare consciously intended such a transformation cannot be proven. What can be observed is that Hamlet is a play preoccupied with death, memory, legacy, and the persistence of identity beyond the grave. These concerns align closely with the emotional terrain one might expect from a parent who has lost a child. Thus, the connection between Hamnet and Hamlet may not rest on documented causation, but on thematic continuity. The death of a child threatens complete erasure. The creation of a work of art ensures endurance. Between those two realities lies the idea that while life is finite, meaning can persist. At its core, the movie examines how different people metabolize grief. Agnes tries to hold it physically and spiritually close, while William distances it and reshapes it into art. Neither approach is portrayed as superior, and both are incomplete on their own. The film is structured as an origin story for grief and for the transformation of grief into art. It deliberately shifts the center of gravity away from William Shakespeare and toward Agnes, presenting the death of Hamnet not as a historical footnote, but as a domestic catastrophe that reshapes an entire family. Agnes is portrayed as deeply attuned to nature, intuition, and physical reality. She reads landscapes, senses shifts in the air, and treats wounds with herbs. Her connection to the forest, and her insistence on giving birth there, reinforces that she sees life and death as part of a natural cycle rather than a purely religious framework. When she is prevented from reaching the forest during the storm and forced to give birth inside, the film visually disrupts her sense of order. The flooding symbolizes a loss of control. The land she trusts betrays her. Her fear that her child might not survive is not only maternal panic. It marks a rupture in her belief that she can interpret and guide fate. Her rejection of the idea that children simply go to heaven further defines her perspective. For her, the dead do not ascend neatly into a theological structure. They remain near. They exist in spaces, in memory, in air and soil. This belief isolates her from others who rely on religious consolation and explains why she cannot accept easy comfort after Hamlet's death. If he has not gone somewhere secure and distant, then he is still somehow here, and therefore still painfully absent. William, in contrast, struggles with emotional articulation in direct relationships. Early in the film, he cannot speak easily to Agnes and instead tells a myth. Story is his medium. After Hamnet's death, he is physically absent at the crucial moment. Agnes experiences the full sensory horror of their son's illness, while William returns only to the aftermath. This difference deepens the fracture in their marriage. Agnes carries embodied memory, the heat of fever, the sound of her son's cries. William carries guilt and imagination. When he returns to London, he does what he knows how to do. He writes. His harsh direction of actors, particularly his insistence that they feel the lines rather than merely recite them, reflects his own struggle. He is attempting to force authenticity into performance. The question of to be or not to be becomes not just a philosophical meditation, but a coded expression of despair. The line about the undiscovered country from whose bourne no traveler returns mirrors the impossibility of knowing where his son has gone. When Agnes attends the performance of the tragedy of Hamlet, her initial reaction is anger and shock. Hearing her son's name publicly repeated feels invasive, as if her private grief has been exposed and repurposed. Yet, as the play unfolds, she begins to see that it is not exploitation, but transmutation. The grief of the prince is not melodramatic spectacle. It is sustained mourning. The ghost scene is pivotal. William plays the ghost, a father who cannot rest and who demands to be remembered. On one level, he is the father speaking to Hamlet. On another, he is a father mourning a son. The roles collapse into one another. When Agnes silently beckons him from the audience, mirroring their earlier intimacy, it signals recognition. She understands that this is how he mourns, not through herbal remedies or physical proximity, but through language and repetition. The final scene, in which Agnes envisions Hamlet on stage, before he disappears into the forest, remains deliberately ambiguous. It is not presented as a literal ghost, but as a projection, a moment of internal reconciliation. For the first time, she smiles. This does not suggest that her grief is resolved. The film does not offer closure. Instead, it proposes transformation. Hamlet's body is gone, and Agnes does not believe he is safely in heaven. Yet she sees that he exists in another form, in voice, in narrative, in the shared experience of an audience. The play becomes the bridge between private sorrow and communal memory, ensuring that Hamlet's name endures. The final image underscores the film's central thesis. The child is gone, but he is not lost to silence. Through story, he remains present, not in doctrine, but in language, performance, and remembrance. The end. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And until next time.